Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Imagine this. You've just stepped off a long flight, excited for your dream vacation. You walk up to the customs desk, hand over your passport, and smile. But instead of a stamp, a red light flashes on the screen. Now you have a massive problem to solve. You are completely innocent, but you have to convince these officers you are just a regular tourist before you end up in a holding cell. Your freedom depends entirely on how well you can communicate. In today's video, we're diving into Chapter 1 of a gripping new series, The Mistaken Identity. As we follow this intense real-life situation, you are going to learn essential English vocabulary for travel, intermediate security phrases, and exactly how to express shock, confusion, and clarity when the pressure is completely on. Are you ready to see if we can clear our name? Let's get into Chapter 1. The wheels of the airplane hit the tarmac with a loud thud. A wave of relief washed over me. After a grueling 10-hour flight, I had finally arrived in the United States. I grabbed my carry-on bag from the overhead bin, stepped off the plane, and followed the crowd toward the customs area. My heart beat with pure excitement. I was ready to start my dream vacation, explore the city, and eat some authentic American food. I joined the long, winding line at the border control checkpoint. When my turn came, I walked up to the desk with a warm smile and handed my passport to the officer. The officer, a stern man named Agent Miller, scanned my document. Suddenly, the screen in front of him flashed a bright, solid red. Agent Miller stopped. He looked at the screen, then looked up at me, his eyes locking onto mine with an intense intensity. The friendly atmosphere instantly vanished. He tapped a button under his desk without saying a word. "Is there a problem, sir?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. They did not answer. They escorted me down a long, sterile corridor away from the bustling arrivals hall. They opened a heavy metal door and led me into a small, windowless interrogation room. The door clicked shut behind me. I was officially detained. The cold air in the small room made me shiver. I sat down on a hard metal chair, staring at the blank walls. A few minutes later, Agent Miller walked in, holding a thick folder. He sat across from me and placed the folder on the metal table. "Look, there must be some kind of mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just here for a 2-week holiday." Agent Miller did not smile. He opened the folder and turned a laptop screen toward me. "We don't make mistakes like this," he replied coldly. "Your passport name matches an international fugitive on our high-security watch list." My jaw dropped, and a knot formed instantly in my stomach. "A criminal? That is impossible," I gasped, shaking my head. "I'm an accountant. I've never broken a law in my life." Agent Miller leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "The individual we are looking for is wanted for a massive financial fraud scheme. He uses the exact same name, the same spelling, and the exact same birth year as you." I stared at the screen, feeling a wave of absolute panic wash over me. The profile picture was blurry, but the data on the screen was a perfect match. "But that isn't me," I whispered, my throat suddenly feeling incredibly dry. "This person is a criminal, but I'm just a normal person." Agent Miller crossed his arms and looked at me with deep suspicion. "That is exactly what a high-level fugitive would say to get past security. Right now, you are a prime suspect, and you are not leaving this airport until we know the absolute truth." I took a deep breath, trying to control the panic threatening to take over. "Please, let me show you my travel documents," I said, my hands shaking slightly.
Everything I have proves that I am just a regular tourist." Agent Miller nodded slowly, granting me permission to open my small carry-on bag. I carefully pulled out a neatly organized folder and placed it on the table. "Here is my complete travel itinerary for the next 2 weeks," I explained, pointing to the papers. "I have a confirmed reservation at a hotel downtown, and I already bought tickets for a city sightseeing tour." I showed him my return flight ticket, which proved I was scheduled to leave the country in 14 days. "Look, I even downloaded a list of local landmarks I wanted to visit, like the famous museums and parks." Agent Miller picked up the papers, flipping through them with a critical eye. He spent a long time studying the hotel booking and the flight details. "A clever criminal would also create a perfect itinerary," Agent Miller said, his voice remaining flat and skeptical. "In our experience, a detailed holiday plan makes an excellent cover story to deceive border control." My heart sank completely at his words. "But it's not a cover story," I protested, looking at him desperately. "I saved money for an entire year just to afford this vacation." Agent Miller put the documents down and looked straight into my eyes. "Anyone can print out a fake hotel confirmation, sir. If you want to prove your innocence, we're going to need much more than just a few pieces of paper."
Agent Miller gestured toward the smartphone sitting on the table. "Unlock your phone, please," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We need to check your personal communications and search for any suspicious activity." My heart pounded as I typed in my passcode and handed the device over to him. I had nothing to hide, but the feeling of having my privacy invaded made me incredibly uncomfortable. Agent Miller began to scroll through my emails, my photo gallery, and my recent text messages. He sat in total silence for a few minutes, his face completely expressionless. Suddenly, his eyebrows shot up and he stopped scrolling. He turned the screen toward me, pointing directly at a text message from 2 days ago. The message was to my best friend, and it read, "Everything is ready. It is time to execute the plan." "Care to explain this?" Agent Miller asked, his eyes narrowing with intense suspicion. "This sounds exactly like a coordinated operation." A wave of absolute panic hit me, but I realized I needed to explain the context immediately. No, you are taking that completely literally," I exclaimed, waving my hands. "That was just a joke. It's an idiom we use when we finally finish planning a trip. The plan was just our strict vacation schedule, like getting to the airport on time and visiting the museums." Agent Miller looked at the message again, clearly analyzing my choice of words. "In our line of work, we do not care about jokes or casual idioms," he said sternly. "We care about facts, and right now your own words are making you look highly dangerous."
The heavy metal door clicked open, breaking the tense silence in the room. A young female officer walked in, holding a fresh cup of water. "Thank you, Agent Miller. I will take over the questioning for a moment," she said softly. Agent Miller stood up, gave me one last suspicious look, and stepped out into the corridor. The new officer sat down, placed the water in front of me, and offered a small, reassuring smile. "I am Officer Davis," she said. "I can see that you are incredibly stressed right now. Let's take a step back from the text messages and talk about your normal daily life." I took a grateful sip of water, feeling my racing pulse slow down just a little bit. "Thank you," I said, my voice finally sounding a bit more stable. "Back home, I live a very quiet, predictable life. I have been working as an accountant at the exact same firm for the past 5 years." I described my boring daily grind, from my morning commute to my ordinary hobbies like reading and running. I am a law-abiding citizen, Officer Davis. I pay my taxes, and I have never even received a speeding ticket. Officer Davis listened patiently, taking notes on a small pad as I spoke. Your story sounds very genuine, she admitted, leaning back in her chair. A background on a normal citizen usually matches this kind of routine. However, high-level financial fugitives are experts at pretending to be ordinary professionals. She looked at me with a mixture of empathy and professional caution. I want to believe you, but I still need concrete proof that you are the accountant, not the criminal.
The stress of the situation finally started to take a toll on my mind. My hands were shaking and my forehead was covered in cold sweat. As Officer Davis asked me more questions about my finances, my confidence began to crumble. English was not my native language, and the intense pressure made me start mixing up my words. I transferred a big money last week, I stammered, trying to explain my vacation savings. I sent a large amount of cash to a foreign account. Officer Davis immediately stopped writing and looked up, her expression turning sharp. You sent a large amount of cash to a foreign account right before flying here? She asked. Panic surged through me as I realized how terribly guilty that sounded. No, wait, what I mean to say is I exchanged my local currency for US dollars, I said quickly. I forced myself to take a deep breath, realizing I needed to slow down and use better communication strategies. Let me rephrase that completely so there is no misunderstanding, I said, speaking as clearly as possible. I withdrew money from my personal savings account to pay for my hotel accommodation here. It was a standard bank transfer to a licensed travel agency, not a secret transaction. I carefully explained the steps I took, correcting my vocabulary errors before they caused more damage. Officer Davis watched me closely, noticing how hard I was working to clarify my statements. I understand, she said, her tone softening slightly as she finished writing. In high-stress situations, a language barrier can easily make an innocent mistake sound like a confession.
Officer Davis tapped her pen on the table, looking at her notes. We need someone independent to verify your identity and your character, she said. I am going to allow you one phone call to someone back home who can vouch for you. I immediately thought of my boss, Sarah, the director of our accounting firm. I will call my employer, I said, quickly retrieving her number from my phone. She has known me for years and can confirm exactly who I am. I dialed the number and placed the phone on speaker so the officer could hear everything. The line rang 4 times and my heart sank as I remembered the massive time zone difference. It was the middle of the night back home, and I prayed desperately that she would wake up. On the 5th ring, a sleepy voice finally answered. Hello? Who is this? Sarah, it's me. I am so sorry to call so late, but I am detained at the airport, I said urgently. The officers need to know about my background and my job. Officer Davis immediately leaned closer to the microphone. Hello, ma'am. This is Border Control. Can you describe the character of this employee? Sarah sounded shocked, but she woke up instantly and spoke with absolute confidence. He is one of the most reliable and trustworthy people I have ever met, Sarah stated firmly. He is a dedicated, law-abiding accountant who has worked sitting at the desk next to me for 5 years. He saved up for months for this specific vacation. There is absolutely no way he is a criminal. Officer Davis nodded as she listened, clearly impressed by my boss's strong defense. Thank you, ma'am. Your statement is very helpful, Officer Davis said before ending the call. She looked across the table at me, and for the first time, the suspicion in her eyes began to fade.
Officer Davis flipped to a new page in the security folder. "Your employer's statement is excellent character evidence," she noted, looking down at the paperwork. "Now, let's look closer at the specific details of the suspect we are tracking." She opened a digital file on her laptop and stared intensely at a list of physical descriptions. "The international fugitive we want has a distinct digital footprint and physical profile," she muttered. "According to our records, the suspect was physically spotted in London 2 weeks ago, conducting a major transaction." I realized this was my golden opportunity to establish a bulletproof alibi. "I have never been to London in my life," I said, leaning forward eagerly, "and I can prove exactly where I was 2 weeks ago using my digital footprint." I opened my social media applications and pulled up my personal profile history. "Look at these time-stamped photos and check-ins," I explained, showing her the screen. 2 weeks ago, I was attending our company's annual conference in my hometown. Here is a group photograph of me standing on stage with 50 other colleagues. I scrolled further down to show her my daily digital activity, including ride-sharing receipts and office check-ins. I was physically sitting at my desk working on corporate tax returns every single day that week. Officer Davis carefully compared the dates and times on my phone with the intelligence report on her screen. She noticed that while the criminal was operating in Europe, my digital trail firmly placed me thousands of miles away. "The timelines do not match at all," she admitted, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "It is physically impossible for one person to be in both places simultaneously."
Officer Davis closed the thick folder and stood up from the table. "The digital timeline is on your side, but I cannot release you on my own authority," she explained. "We are waiting for the final verification from our central database to check your fingerprints against the suspects." She walked out of the room to check the system, leaving me alone with a strict guard standing by the door. The waiting game was completely agonizing, and every single second felt like an hour. I tried to keep my composure, but my nerves were stretched to their absolute limit. To distract myself from the ticking clock, I decided to make some polite small talk with the guard. "It must be incredibly difficult to manage so many passengers every day," I said, keeping my voice calm. The guard looked surprised but nodded slowly, his posture relaxing just a fraction. "If I were a dangerous criminal, I certainly wouldn't choose a busy international airport to enter the country," I added with a weak smile. "True, but you'd be amazed by what people try to pull off at border control," the guard replied softly. We spoke casually for a few minutes about the challenges of airport security and the stress of long-haul flights. Using conditional sentences and polite conversation helped me stay grounded and show that I had nothing to hide. Suddenly, the heavy metal door clicked open again, and Officer Davis walked back into the room. She was holding a single piece of paper, and she had a completely different expression on her face. Officer Davis walked straight to the table and laid the paper down. "The official database results just came through from our central headquarters," she said, a warm smile finally breaking across her face. "Your fingerprints do not match the suspect's records at all. The system has officially cleared your name, and your identity is fully verified." A massive wave of relief washed over me, and I let out a deep, heavy sigh. "Thank you so much, Officer Davis," I said, my voice filled with genuine emotion. "I can't thank you enough for listening to my story and helping me clear this up." She handed my passport back to me, opened a heavy stamper, and pressed it firmly onto a clean page. The loud thud of the ink stamp was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. "Welcome to the United States," she said, gesturing toward the door. "I am truly sorry for the extreme inconvenience and the stress of this ordeal." I gathered my travel documents, zipped up my carry-on bag, and stood up from the hard metal chair. I walked out of the interrogation room, down the long corridor, and finally stepped into the bustling arrivals hall. The bright lights and the loud chatter of regular tourists welcomed me to the city. As I walked out into the warm afternoon air to catch a taxi, I smiled, realizing just how powerful clear communication can be. I had survived a terrifying real-life crisis, and my dream vacation was finally about to begin.
That intense interrogation was definitely not the warm welcome I expected. However, looking back at that crazy afternoon in the airport, I realized something incredibly valuable. When you are facing a massive real-life problem, losing your temper or panicking never helps. Your best tools are a calm mind, clear explanations, and the right vocabulary to defend yourself. Learning to speak clearly isn't just about passing an exam. Sometimes it is the exact thing that saves your freedom. Wow, what an absolute nightmare of a situation! Can you imagine being trapped in a room like that, miles away from home, trying to prove who you are? But notice how our character handled it. They didn't scream or give up. Instead, they used clear time markers, careful descriptions, and essential communication strategies to correct their own mistakes and win over the officers. Today, we practiced some incredible intermediate travel and security vocabulary, and we saw exactly how powerful language can be in a real-life crisis. You can find all the vocabulary of the story down below in the description box. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a crazy misunderstanding at an airport or while traveling? Let me know your stories in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed this episode, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new chapter where we take on a brand new real-life challenge. Thank you so much for watching. Keep practicing your English, and I will see you in the next story. Goodbye.